Hi, I'm Launi with Learn Law for All, and today we have with us Brian Chase. Hi, Brian.
I
So, a little bit about Brian. First of all, he is the managing director of digital forensic and e-discovery at Archer Hall. It's interesting. He was an attorney, well, is an attorney, but you're no longer litigating.
Yep,
You're not longer
correct.
practicing.
Yep.
He did get his undergraduate degree in MIS from U of A. He got his law degree from U of A, and he's licensed to practice in Arizona and New York. He's also an adjunct professor of law at U of A, and he holds a number of digital forensic certifications. And he testifies in state and federal courts as an expert in digital forensics. So very thankful to have Brian here today. He just did a CLE with us on location devices and kind of the best ones. I'm looking right here at, and he's going to go through them, but how to find and use the location information that you can find on devices. And so he's going to explain that in a second, just as as our regular disclaimer. Watching this does not create an attorney-client relationship. Brian is licensed in Arizona and New York. I'm licensed in Arizona. This does not create an attorney-client relationship. It's for entertainment and educational purposes only. So with that out of the way, Brian, let's talk. You and I just did a CLE on this. And so we wrote down a couple of things. The whole CLE is incredibly interesting. It's just, you just don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? There's so much out there that's available.
It's a lot of different types of location data out there.
It's incredible. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about like what's the most common and maybe easiest location information that you can get.
So one that's it's very common and often overlooked is just pictures. If you're taking a picture with your cell phone, there is embedded in that picture, in the metadata, it's called EXIF data, but embedded in that is GPS information. You take a picture, your phone puts in that picture where you took that picture, when you took that picture. And so every picture taken with a cell phone is going to have that data. Now, you can disable that. You can turn that off in your phone settings, but most people don't. And so pictures can be a great source of location data because of all of that metadata stored in them. And most people have no idea how much data is being captured every single time they take a picture.
It can be, I'm guessing, super dangerous too, when especially for women, if they're sharing pictures with someone they've met on some kind of online dating thing.
Yep.
That can be very dangerous. But how do you get that information from them, from the picture?
Yeah, a lot of places to get it. So first, you just need to get a copy of the picture, so you can get that directly from the phone. A lot of people back their photos up to like Google Photos or iCloud. You just download it there. And then to see that data, if you're at least on a Windows computer, just right click on the picture, go to Properties. It's going to open up this little tab. And at the top, there's a pane called the Details tab. You click on that, it's going to show you all of the information, all that EXIF data, including where it's located. So you don't need any special tools or software or anything. Just right click, go to Properties, click on that Details tab, and all that information's right there. So pretty easy to see.
So does it show like the location and date and time on there?
It does, yep. And even on some phones, you can do this. So on like an iPhone, if you just kind of swipe up on the picture, it will show you the location. That you can do it on Android. I forget exactly where the option is, but you can see it locally on the phone too. But you can also just do it from your computer.
Yeah, it's scary. When I was listening to your CLE, I was getting very nervous. Thankfully, I think you
Yeah.
said Facebook and some of those apps have taken that metadata out. So if you do upload something,
Right.
but you got to be so careful. And you had also talked
Yeah.
about what are those geo trackers?
Yeah. I mean, there's in a lot of ways you're going to track location. So there are devices that you can like plug into a car or attach to a car battery that have GPS built in, and they have cellular connections built in, and that can track location. And now I realize when you were saying geo trackers, I remember what you're talking about, which was if you take a picture, there are people whose hobby it is to look at the background of pictures and determine where in the world it was taken. You'll find them on like sites like Reddit, and people will give them a picture and they will figure out by looking at details in the background where that picture was taken. It's very interesting how they do it. Most of them are not malicious at all. They're just doing it for fun, but it could be done for malicious purposes like stalking.
Yeah, I mean, there's really smart stalkers out there, I'm assuming. So
Yep.
just be careful with that information. So you also talk a lot about smart home devices, which again, super scary. You know, these things make me want to just go out to the middle of the desert, take off, you know, get rid of my Wi-Fi and have no
Yep.
smartphone. But I love the, you know, the ease of using things. I love the
Yeah.
ability to talk to Alexa and tell her to play my music and turn on lights and, you know, remind me of things. So talk to me about
Yep.
what are some of those devices that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably not thinking about your Amazon Echo or Alexa, you know, being used for location data, but it could. And it's really that constant trade-off of you know, privacy versus convenience. Especially if you're using a product that is free or mostly free, you know, it doesn't have a monthly fee. Those companies have to be making money some way, and one way they do that is by tracking your data. And so every time you talk to that Amazon Echo, it's recording that audio, sending that audio up to Amazon servers. So there's no GPS there's no location, but there's your voice talking to a speaker that's in your home. And so it can establish location kind of anecdotally by looking at that information. And lots of these smart home devices do that. If you're turning on or off device, if you're interacting with a smart home device, it's recording that data, it's recording that interaction, and you can use that to infer a location based on the fact that somebody is using that device and we know where that device is installed. So it's a kind of a roundabout way of getting location data.
How do you get that? I mean, how do you get that from Amazon? Amazon's a big company.
Yeah, most of this data is stored in the cloud. So often you can just go through the app on your smartphone to get it. So for your Amazon Echo, you go into that Alexa app, there's a history section, all the data is right there. But a lot of these you can just download from the cloud. So there's some laws out there, some in Europe, some in California, that say consumers have a right to their own data. So if you want to figure out like, how do I download my Amazon data? Go to Google, type in how do I download my Amazon data, and because of these laws, you'll get a page that says, here's how you do it. And you can download your own data that way. So you can do that for most of these cloud products. Most of them have an informational page that tells you how to do it. So fairly easy to get a lot of this data.
So how do you authenticate it?
Well, that's certainly the concern when it comes to litigation, is just because you get it, who's going to testify about that at trial? So it could be the user. You know, the user could say, I went in, I downloaded my data, and this data is, you know, accurate. This is what I said to my device at this date and time. So that's one method. But depending on the case type, you might not want to do that. You're a criminal defense lawyer. You don't want to put your client on the stand to have to authenticate that data. So you might want an investigator or an expert to do it. You might be able to do it by having, you know, an Amazon custodian of records respond to a subpoena or warrant or something like that. But certainly be thinking about that issue of, all right, I've got this data, but how am I going to introduce it at trial? So when you're at that stage of collection, be thinking about the end stage. How do I get this admitted in court? So you make sure you've got the proper authentication for trial.
Now, if you do that for someone, if you go through and gather that information, then do you testify about that typically?
Yeah, we do. There's kind of one or two ways we do it. So if we collect that, we can just testify about it at trial. Another method, depending on the jurisdiction, is under the federal rules of evidence and some state court rules. There's Rule 902, Section 14. And it's a rule that says a qualified person can write a declaration about how digital evidence was obtained, and that data will be self-authenticating at trial. So if we're working in federal court, for example, we can just write a declaration saying we went in, we downloaded this Amazon data, this copy is complete and accurate. That data is self-authenticating at trial. You don't need to pay that expert to show up and testify to authentication.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And also then if the court doesn't allow you to do that, make sure you disclose the witness as soon as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise you're stuck without it. You had in the CLE, you show this map, and you showed it in a couple of the CLEs, which I love. It's scary and interesting at the same time. You know what I'm talking about, the Google, where the Google
Yep.
tracks your every move, and then if you take a picture, it shows exactly where you took the picture, what time of day. So talk to me about that. What is that?
Yeah, so it's called Google Timeline. It is my favorite source of location data. It tracks about a third of all phones. So about a third of all phones in the world are sharing their location with Google. And that data all gets aggregated into this Google Timeline. So you can log in to Google Timeline with your account and see what's there. And it knows the difference between you walking and riding a bike and driving a car and taking public transit. It knows where you were, when you were. With really granular information, some of the most detailed location data we can get. That's what makes it such a great source to use in litigation. Also a little scary about how much data is up there and how much is being stored and how it can be obtained by other people, like law enforcement might be getting it if they're investigating a case. Great source of data. You can go check to see what data you've got up there. There's great reasons to keep it turned on. You know, you go on a vacation, you take some pictures. Couple years from now, you go and you think, where was that? We went to that great restaurant. What was the name of it? When did we go there? You can go in your timeline and see that, or you can go see the pictures you took of your vacation. So there are some really nice reasons to have it. Google will even remind you and say, hey, you took this vacation 5 years ago. Here's some pictures. So it's a really nice source, but you are always making that trade-off, privacy versus convenience. So just be aware of it, not necessarily turn it off, if you like those features, but if you don't like those features, go turn off that data because it's a lot of data they're tracking.
Well, and I loved it because you do show yours and you go to a specific date and you zoom
Yep.
right in on a date, and you click on it and there's the pictures and where you were, like a bar that you were at with the robots, and
Yep.
it's really interesting and great information. I searched mine and didn't have mine on. And parts of me wants to, parts of me don't. Look, my life's so boring. It's not like
Yep.
it's a big deal for me. But I still always just have that little bit of nervousness. Um,
Yep.
but the same thing, and we discussed this too, if you're going through a divorce, or you've been divorced, or you've shared this information, your password and your Google account information with another person. Ugh, I mean, this is how people get stalked.
Yep.
We talk about this, and we talk about this in a different CLE. So by the way, check out all of Brian's CLEs, because he goes through all of this stuff, and it's just so fascinating, because there's things that you wouldn't think of, for ways to be stalked, without that you would just never, you always feel like, okay, there's a GPS on me, there's an eye tag on me, there's something on my phone, he always seems to know what I'm doing, or she always seems to know what I'm doing. Well, there's a lot of ways that can happen. I mean, even right
Yeah.
down to the door locks, right?
Yeah. I mean, all of these devices connected to the internet are storing data. And so it's a question of how much data and how can that data be used or misused. So you should be thinking about, with any of these devices, what kinds of data might they be tracking, and could this data be misused? So I'm not against these devices by any means. I have many of them myself, but I'm aware of that trade-off, and that's the critical thing. Be aware of what this device might be storing about you, and then be thinking, do I care? Is that okay? Is that trade-off okay for me? Is the value I'm getting out of this worth the data that I'm giving up to this company, or that this company might give up to other people? So always be kind of thinking about that trade-off when you're dealing with these smart home devices, or really any electronic device you get.
Yeah, I mean, I think the convenience of our phones and our payment apps, and everything that we can put on there, but the door lock, if you can unlock it from your phone. My brother actually did that for me one time. I was at his house, he wanted me to put in some packages, and he unlocked his door lock from his phone. um you know it, it's great to have it, but again, just be careful who you give those passwords to, and
Yeah.
if somebody's downloaded the app, make sure you undo that and reinstall it to make sure that information is no longer on there.
Yep.
Well, Brian, thank you so much. I always love having you on here. You're just filled with really great information. Brian, by the way, teaches all the time. He's going, to conferences all over the world regularly. So if you have any questions, reach out for him. He's really great talking to attorneys and helping them understand what can and can't be useful. So thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks for having me.